Hello, friends! Welcome to another exciting episode of Cooking with Jay and Kay and
Sandra.
Sandra.
That's right.
Doesn't rhyme quite as good, does it?
No.
We make a lot of bread here at the homestead. So this is just a quick and easy way. It's what works for us because I'm making like 6 loaves a week. And so I'm going to show you real quickly what we do. These are all items that we have stored. I'm going to use some wheat that's already ground today and get going. So the first thing I'm going to do is use about 3 cups of, this is ground red wheat. Now I use yeast because I like the bread to rise. I have measured the temperature. It needs to be between like 105 and 110 degrees. And if I get mine out of the tap, if I let this get hot, it's the perfect temperature. I'm gonna get 3 cups of water. Like I said, you can use the little small packets of yeast for each batch of bread. You can use the little packets. We use so much of it that I buy it in 1 pound bricks, and I've measured. So what is equivalent to a package is 2 1/4 teaspoons. And I'm actually going to make a double batch. So I'm going to use about 4 1/2 teaspoons here. Okay, so I'm just going to stir my yeast in. This is called proofing your yeast, and you just want to dissolve it in the water. Now, if your water's too hot, it'll kill your yeast, and if it's too cold, the yeast is not going to dissolve in there well and start to be active. So that's why it was important for the temperature to be just right. So I have my yeast dissolved in the water, and I'm going to start to pour it into my flour. Just stirring it in there as I go. Now, there's not a certain amount of flour that I use. It could be up to 6 cups. You're just going to start with some flour in there and add. It's done by feel. I probably made about 10 loaves before I figured out what it was supposed to feel like, because you know, you're looking at when you bake it, what it looks like, how it cuts, how dense it is, because if you oversaturate your flour, it's going to be too dense. So I'm just getting that started. And you can see there's a lot of bubbles in there, and that's a good thing. That's my yeast working. I'm going to add, I do put some white flour in there too. We have red wheat berries and white wheat berries, so we have both types of flour stored. And in this, I'm also going to put a teaspoon of salt. Since this is actually double batch, I'm going to use 2 teaspoons. So I'm going to stir that in. And I'm just going to add more flour. And like I said, there's not a particular amount of flour. It's just when it's right. So what's going to be right is, as I'm stirring it in, it's pulling away from the edges of the bowl cleanly. So right now, I don't know if you can see that, but it's still sticking to the edges of the bowl. So I'm going to add flour. Now, we use so much flour. I'll show you. We just have our flour. When Alan grinds it, he puts it in these big tubs. Or if I bought flour at the store, then I would just open it and dump it in those big tubs, just because it's so much easier to use. So this is just 4 ingredients. It's water, yeast, flour, and a little bit of salt. So very simple. Things that any homesteader would have readily available. Okay, so I'm going to just flour my surface here. All right, this is still tacky. I'm going to start to knead it. You can over knead it, and it'll be very dense bread, and you can also under knead your bread. So this was one of the parts that I had to figure out, was when is the proper amount of kneading. And that's something that's You know, the bread making is an art. It's a skill. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull some of this off, and I can tell this is gonna be too sticky right now, but what we do is just pull it out and then start to stretch it, because I'm looking for when the gluten is stretchy, and see how that's starting to tear apart instead of getting thin where I can see through it. So this needs to be kneaded more. It's still too sticky.
Kind of like our country. The bread is tearing apart. We don't have enough gluten in our country.
That's when it all went south.
Yep.
It's when everybody suddenly became allergic to gluten.
Yeah, when we went gluten free, we kind of, that's the way of the old Constitution, didn't it? But that's all right. Who needs freedom anyway?
And I'm looking for the point, which I've got a lot of dough here in my hand, but I'm looking for the point where as I stretch the dough, that I start to get little windows through it. And you can see, like down here at the bottom, it's starting to get to where I can see through the dough, but it's holding together. It's not ripping apart like it was before. So this dough has been kneaded enough. All right, so I'm just going to, you can oil, I'm just using pan because it's easy. Just oiling. Some people flour their bowl that you're going to put the bread in to let it rise. So I'm just going to put it in. I'm going to cover it with a towel, and I'm going to let it rise till it doubles.
Welcome to the Toasted Goat Tavern. For a meal perspective, we're going to do 3 1/3 cups of flour. Then we're going to, instead of yeast, we use baking powder. We're going to take 2 teaspoons, put them bad boys in there. And then we're going to do 1 teaspoon of salt-ish. Bam. Now we're going to mix the dry ingredients together. This is important. You should do the dry ingredients before you add any of the wet, or your baking powder tends to be clumped up in one area. Turn that off. 10 ounces of milk. It could be goat milk, store-bought milk, or powdered milk. I've used all the above at different times. Lovingly add that into the mix. Put a little on my hands there. And get down in here. Get in there and punch it all around. A little more of that. Now with this one, we just want to get it to where it's about 1 inch thick. Something about like that. And a roundish type of thing. That looks about right. Put a little flour on the pan there. Take the loaf and place it thusly. This part is a crucial step. We're going to cut nearly all the way through the loaf. And I usually will tease some space in there side to side like that. And if you don't do this step, the inside will be raw. Because one time I tried it without doing this part, and it was pretty much just dough in the inside. So you just cut kind of a cross in there, a plus sign, whatever you want to call it. Get a little more space there. Don't want to cut all the way down to the pan, but stop just short of that. And then that's ready to go in the oven.
Okay, so I'm going to just spray my baking dishes and get them ready for the loaves. And all right, now this is important to know when your dough has risen enough. I'm going to just stick 2 fingers in it. And I want to see if the holes stay. If the holes close back up immediately, then the dough is still rising and I need to let it sit a little longer. But you can see I stuck my fingers in and it stayed the holes exactly the way they were. So this is ready to take out. And I'm gonna divide it in half because this is actually 2 loaves worth.
Just like our country.
Divided right down the middle. And I'm gonna just knead it a little bit just to make it into a roll and kind of shape it. Because it will get air bubbles in it, you want to just whap it down on the counter a few times. You're gonna need to be touching the ends of your dish, but not, it doesn't have to be touching the sides because we're gonna put this back in. I just put it in a really, really warm oven. I heated the oven up to like 170, not even. And leave the door open just to make it warm.
Like
and I turned it off, but matter of fact, you can hear it, so I'm just gonna turn it off.
Just like our borders, leave the door open.
And
Come on in. Come on.
so get my loaf shaped here. Throw it down a couple times. And you put the seam side down. There we go. So we're gonna put these back in and let them rise until they're doubled. So they'll be about to the top of the pan, and then we'll bake it.
Welcome back to Kay's Country Kitchen. Today we're going to take this here candy roaster squash, also called a banana squash, and we're going to prep it for cooking purposes. First you got to skin it before you gut it. So we're going to skin that puppy, about like that right there.
Is that the same peeler you use for the goat hooves?
Yeah, I like to use one tool for everything. I don't even wash it. I find that a little goat residue imparts a beautiful flavor to the cuisine.
You look so ridiculous with the apron and hat. Oh, the apron really brings out your eyes.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's like the same color. It's pretty.
Well, thank you.
It's very pretty.
Thank you very much for noticing.
Yeah, this is the elusive candy roaster squash that is native to North Georgia. Handed down most likely by the Cherokee or who knows. But they're good. Now, this will feed to the chickens. Hi friends, welcome back. So take a small paring knife and we're going to kind of remove the ends here just to make sure there's nothing funky happening. Yes, that's very nice. Come here. Ah yes, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Now then, I usually will half this thing about like that. And then we're going to save these seeds. That's next year's crop. Kind of like batoning through wood, but different. Only the finest seeds will do, the ones that look right and feel right. Some of them are kind of papery feeling, and I tend to cull those out.
Let the dough rise for the second time as a loaf, and now we're going to put it in the oven at 375 for 25 minutes. That's it.
Not much, just enough. Set that thing on high, and then we'll dial it back. Let the steam do the cooking.
Let them caramelize a bit. Drop one down below. Skewer it. Saved it. In this bowl contains 2 rabbits. I put in the crock pot for basically a full day cooked on low. And just let them cook down to where the meat just kind of fell off of the bones. And then I put it in the refrigerator last night. And I kept all of the broth and everything in there because that's all really, really good fats and gelatin and things like that that's really, really good for you. And that's going to go in the stew. It's already cooked, so it's not like we need to cook the meat. But we're going to put it in there, and once the vegetables are all cooked up, it's going to be ready to go. I'm going to add about a cup of rice. I like to add rice to a lot of this stuff because it just kind of hefts it up, adds some thickness to the stew, adds some bulk and some calories. So about a cup for this size pot is probably going to be about right. I'm going to add about a spoonful of salt to start with, just to let it cook in there. Maybe I'll go 2. 1.5. 1.5 looks good. And then we can salt it to taste afterwards when it's all ready to go.
And I'm gonna scoot Alan's loaf over. This one goes for another 20 minutes. All right, I'm gonna just turn this out. And so we just turn that out onto a cooling rack. I'm gonna flip it over, and there we go. I'm just gonna let it cool.
I've allowed some caramelization to go on with my onions and stuff here and the garlic, and I'm going to add this to the pot. Put the rabbits and the broth in the pot, put it on the stove, let it come to basically a boil, and then just let it simmer for a while until the rice is done, vegetables are cooked, and it's ready to eat. Homegrown rabbit soup. So this has been in the refrigerator, so it's kind of all gelatinous, but once it heats back up, it'll liquefy and be scrumptious. And I'll add a little bit of water to this, but it doesn't need very much. Just a little bit of water to get the steam action going.
The bread is done. So now, look at that. Ain't that pretty?
This is a Russian death spoon.
Ah, yes, the Russian death spoon. Delightful.
It's the perfect thing. All you got to really do to stir your soups is this.
Just give her the old
Yeah,
spin.
just give it in there and it's...
That's the titanium model, is it not?
It is titanium.
Ah, yes.
Really works good for this purpose. The lemon juice is a key flavor additive here. Prevents scurvy. It's a win-win.
That rabbit's good to go, man. The rice has cooked up nicely. Lovely. So we're going to dish up. Make sure that we have rice and vegetables, rabbit and broth, all equally. Yes, lovely. And voila. Man, that's good. That broth is good.
Right? Does it need salt or anything? Salt and pepper? About
Stick
it?
some of the bread in there, man.
Yeah, so we got two types of bread here. This is the more dense, less dense. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Come on.
All right,
Taste this one.
try that candy roaster. That's the stuff right there.
Plain candy roaster, nothing on it, no sugar,
No, nothing.
no butter.
This is legit.
That's a good meal. And this is all stuff that can be done with either long-term food storage or homegrown stuff.
Yeah, a good bit of this is homegrown.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate you watching. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to see more of us, go to On3. Link will be in the description. And hit the thumbs up. We'll see you next time.